Hello and a warm welcome to everyone who have joined us today. We hope you are keeping safe during these trying times of the pandemic, and we really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule and joining us today for this session. My name is Anand Dutta. I take care of the Global Alliances for Cybersecurity at Tech Mahindra, and I'm your host for the event for the next 1 hour. Today, will be discussing on a very interesting and a very thought-provoking topic. The topic for the day is a paradigm shift in workload protection in the hybrid world, right? So to discuss this topic, we have an elite panel of which is comprising of the industry leaders who would be sharing their point of views and thought leadership on this chosen topic today. I am delighted to introduce the speakers for today's session. First off, I would like to welcome Mr. Rajshekhar Joshi. Mr. Rajshekhar Joshi is the head of Global Technology Transformation, Information Security, and IT Governance in a group which is $50 billion US dollar group, which is Aditya Birla Group of India. It's a premier global conglomerate, right? He's a computer science graduate from IIT Roorkee. Raj also is leading, he has held leadership positions in India and abroad, including heading the business for software services, global and pan-India customers over 30 long illustrious career. He has been an entrepreneur, National Working Committee member of Electronics and Computer Software Promotion Council, and he has been actively involved in social cause of education and water conservation. He regularly writes in publications like Economic Times, CIO News, among others, and he writes on public technology, public policies, IT industry subjects, digital technology. So that's quite a resume there, Raj. Thanks for joining us. We're very happy to have you in the panel today. Also joining Raj would be Mr. Ross Traynor. Ross is part of CISCO's APJC Secure Workload and Analytics Division. Ross leads the pre-sales and activities across ASEAN and India. Simply put, Ross leads the pre-sales for Cisco Secure Workload, which is formerly was known as Tetration, and the Cisco Secure Network Analytics, which was formerly known as Stealth Watch. And these are advanced solutions focusing on workload enforcement and threat visibility, either on the on-premise as well as the cloud. Ross is originally from UK. He immigrated to Australia in 2005, and now finally he's settled in the beautiful Singapore since 2013. And finally, Mr. Rajesh Chandiramani, Chief Digital Officer and Global Business Head of Data Analytics, AI, Cybersecurity, and Blockchain for Tech Mahindra. He has joined us. With his career spanning 28 years, Rajesh has led large and diverse global programs and initiatives across various organizations. Rajesh has played a key role in Tech Mahindra's transformation journey, where he has contributed significantly to the company's strategy and business growth. Prior to this, he had a brief stint with Capgemini as a global sales officer. And in the past, he has held various senior positions with many multinational like BCGI, Comverse, Tata Global Telesystems, and Hughes Network Systems. So it's an elite panel. Like I said, we are very happy to have all of you on the panel today, Rajesh, Ross, and Rajshekhar. Thank you for joining us today. So I'm sure the audience would be very, very keen to understand and hear these leaders talk about this topic of paradigm shift in the workload protection. But before that, I would like to suggest the audience to please use the Q&A window for all your questions. We would be definitely taking your questions at the end of the sessions for the last 10 minutes, where the leaders would be kind of sharing their point of views on your questions also. And without further ado, let's start with the panel discussion. And we would have Mr. Rajshekhar Joshi first talk about his point of view. As a leader for a big conglomerate, what do you think is the importance of workload protection and where we should start? Raj, if you can take the stage, please.
Thank you, Anand, for the kind introduction. And it's a pleasure to be among industry leaders and industry highly experienced people like Rajesh, Ross, and you all. I'd like to thank Tech Mahindra and CISCO to give me this opportunity to speak in this very, very, what you call as very interesting and very useful event in the context of today, and also allow me to share my experiences. Thank you so much. And I think this, the title of the event itself, a paradigm shift in workload protection in the hybrid world, uh, to some people may look a little bit, very, very narrow definition, but actually it's a very, very wide and very highly impacting phenomenon in itself. The kind of audience, I'm sure, which is there listening to us or seeing us, is very well aware of the climate trend. No need to tell much about that to this audience. And all industries, companies at different stages are, they are there are different stages of cloud migration or developing applications in cloud using varying degree of native and other cloud-enabled capabilities and so on and so forth. And we have gone through, various what we call as cycles of euphemism as far as cloud is concerned. At one time, people were dismissing it, and then it became, everybody has to go to public cloud. But today, the reality which has dawned is that somewhere, as they say, the truth is in somewhere in between, and hybrid cloud is a reality. The reason very much is that there are companies which are born in the cloud, which is there, as we know, many as large e-commerce companies and so on. But at the same time, the huge sector, the largest sector of the economy is legacy. They have already got operations. They're already in data centers. They have large businesses to protect of. And coming to the context of Aditya Birla Group, we are one of the largest conglomerates in India, with our presence, as we know, that industry-leading companies like Ultratech Cement, Hindalco Industries, Aditya Birla Fashion Retail, and so on. I know there are finance and capital, and globally we have large operations across, multiple, tens of countries. I think I'll even lose the count at times. It's like almost 40, 45 countries we are present in, and so on. So, and we are largely a manufacturing-driven conglomerate, which is there, but a large sector of services also, as you know, as finance, retail, and telecom, both of an idea. So, seeing, considering this mix of businesses we have, we really just can't move to cloud. We just can't say, okay, let's go to cloud and risk our business. So, hybrid cloud will be reality, which is there, and there will be some operations which are in the cloud. There will be new projects, like, for example, we have built a cloud first sort of an approach where any application which has to be developed has to be first seen that can be done in cloud or not, which is there. And of course, at the same time, the kind of let me also tell you the security profile, security ecosystem profile of Aditya Birla Group. We have five large cybersecurity centers, and based in US retail business. Then we have in telecom and finance and manufacturing driven, which I directly look after, which is there. And the operations in 31 countries. It reaches out to employees of around 40,000 employees in 31 countries. And so I think the kind of landscape we have, and different companies, for example, somebody's moving SAP to cloud. There are different stages, and we have a large data center, and the very thought of moving it to cloud is something gives us, as you say, shudders in our spine, which is there. And also at the same time, we have one of the largest companies, which is 90% in the cloud. So it's like a whole mix of companies and the presences in cloud. So therefore, and there are many companies, for example, whose SAP is in the cloud, but at the same time, a lot of applications are in the data center. So hybrid cloud is a reality, which is there. And I think and that's where these strategies have to be very well thought of, which is there. So I'll come to this point, which is there. And now, as we all know that in security in cloud, actually, I would say has two paradoxes. Somebody says, earlier it was a thought that cloud, everything is insecure. You don't know where data is, where it is going, who is protecting, and so on and so forth. So that's one view which is held by many people, which is there. And of course, there are regulatory considerations, compliance considerations, and so on. And there is another view which feels actually, which somehow has a euphemism that if you move to cloud, you're secure. Because they are big companies, you are in the cloud and you are secure. You don't have to do anything. They will take care of it, willy-nilly, automatically on their own. So I think, because people have not really gone deep into it, and that's where many of them hold these kind of, what you call as quite diverse notions, which is there. But the fact is that the truth lies somewhere in between. If you move to cloud, you have to work hard, It's not just you're in the cloud and you will be secure. You have to look at configurations of applications. You have to look at access policies, and you have to look at the cloud security posture in totality. You have to look at the infrastructure, and so on and so forth. We deal with these issues day in and day out. Actually, yesterday itself, we almost signed off a contract for cloud security posture management, one of the largest companies. So, and if you go deep into it, and then we have in the hybrid world also, and we have a very large security program. So I spoke on the criticality of hybrid. I spoke on the importance of security, which is there. Now I will come to and then I will try to combine these concepts and tell you a total picture. What it looks like is the kind of security program we have really enhanced our security program this year, which is there, and it's like in multiples, to say the least, which is there. We are going deep into an endpoint, where we have endpoint security of servers in the cloud, as well as in the server of the assets in the cloud, as well as servers in the data center, and endpoints with people. So there's a triage: data center, endpoints with people, and in the cloud. So the endpoint level security, we are going deep into network segmentation, where we have to segment the networks of multiple companies in the data center and their applications in the cloud. It's a huge project in itself. Then there's a cloud-based VPN, because a lot of VPN today is what you call as on-premise based, going to cloud-based VPN. Then you have cloud security access gateway, which is there. That how do you access your asset, the internet or the assets in cloud through a security access gateway. Then we have CASB, and so on and so forth. So seeing the endpoint, the server, and and particularly if you see the defense in depth architecture, which they say of control, monitor, detect, and respond and recover. So with all these parameters in mind, whenever we have assets here and we have assets there. It's not really, so we have to always look at that. What are we doing there, and what are we doing here? It's just there in the cloud and in the endpoint. So if I have to combine these three things, then the realism of hybrid environments, the kind of notions about security in the cloud, and the third is the ambition to increase the security posture, which almost every company in the world is doing in different ways. So if you combine these three things, which is there, what it needs is a unified security, unified way of looking at things. You can't do something in the cloud and you cannot do something later in the endpoint. So when it comes to multiple dimensions, let me take one by one. For example, security of infrastructure. You have to have a unified view. How are your ports? How is your ports are, when you move to cloud, your ports are open. Which ports have to be opened? What privileges have to be given, and so on and so forth. It has to have a uniform view. The data has to move from clouds to data center and data center to cloud. And hence you need to have a uniform, what we call as encryption. You need to have, because in a multi-cloud environment again, so we need to have unified policies, tools which can have a single pane across, which is there. Visibility, like EDR we are doing, EDR in the cloud and EDR in the data center. It needs to have a single, because you cannot do a triage if you have different assets in the cloud and different assets in the data center. So from the point of view of assets in the cloud, from the point of view of monitoring the infrastructure, from the point of view of keeping the data encrypted by unifying standards, by having uniform access policies, and also looking at the infrastructure provision, you have to have a unified view. There is just no way about it. We cannot just manage. And for companies like us, the ability to manage with simplicity is one of the most important things. If I'm not able to see everything at one place and everything tried and integrated to each other, I just don't believe it is possible to secure ourselves. So I think these were my words, and I think I hope I've been able to express my view to the audience, and I'd like to definitely wrap it up by saying that, as again, three things: heightened better security posture management, realism of hybrid, and also the necessity to be secure in cloud. I think these are three very important things which needs to be taken care by any enterprise, from a practitioner's point of view, from someone who is in the midst of doing this right now as we speak, literally. is something I'd like to give a message to everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, Anand. Thank you, everyone. I hope it was a very useful thing, dialogue to happen with you.
Absolutely, Raj. Thank you so much. That was very insightful and very enlightening, because there is a very important topic which you touched on, which was the two paradox. I love that example that you gave. Some people are not ready to move to cloud because they see cloud is not secure at all. Or some people are saying that I would move to cloud because cloud is 100% secure. But that's not the perfect world, which you rightly mentioned. Thank you for that viewpoint. That was very, very helpful. Because I think I heard in one of the analyst report, they talked about 76% of the CISOs or the CIOs are not moving to cloud because they feel cloud is not secure. Actually, they have not started the cloud transformation journey at all. So I think that's a very, very important point that you touched. And then definitely on the compliance side of things, the point that you touched, because for a Aditya Birla like group, which is such a big conglomerate, the security posture needs to be in place, right? And probably that's one thing which you've stressed very, very hard, right? That the security posture to be managed across such a big group, we have to have an open play for that. And for that only, we have Mr. Ross Taylor with us on this, and Ross would be talking about how we actually do it in the real physical world, right? So Ross, welcome again on this panel. So
Thanks, Anand.
let's understand what is the point of view that Cisco brings in, right, towards the workload protection, because we know workload is the backbone, right? It's the processes which work with the application, and this application work with all other applications in the world. So if your workload is not protected, basically all your applications and all your business processes are at risk. So a viewpoint of Cisco would be excellent.
Absolutely, and yeah, thank you for the introduction, Anand, and yeah, was really interested to hear what Raj said there throughout his presentation. There was a number of points I wanted to touch on, but you're right. I mean, right now, if you're looking at workloads and applications, you can have a secure application, but the workload could be insecure, or you could have a insecure workload, meaning your application's at risk there. So it's a vital that you get this right. There's a number of things that I think we could go on for days on this, but I heard you mention CSPM, that posture management, which is absolutely a major point. It has to be done, and it's got to be automated. It's got to be ongoing, Raj, as well. It's just too big to do this manually. There's a load of points in that kind of CSPM scenario. I was laughing actually, because a lot of the conversations I have with customers are those two paradoxes. And I don't want to move to the cloud because they're not secure, or I'm going totally to the cloud because it's 100% secure. It's really that it's a shared responsibility. And I think a lot of customers maybe, don't appreciate that it is from both sides, both, the cloud providers as well as you as the customer, and obviously the partner vendors. So yeah, I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about workload protection, because it is vital. This is where our crown jewels are. This is where all that information, where our users are, they're using the applications. We need to protect these workloads, and they're forever changing. So let me just bring up my my screen here, and Andy, just let me know if I'm sharing okay.
It's coming up. Yeah, we can see your screen now.
Fantastic, lovely. Well, thank you again once again for having me. It's really great to be part of this prestigious presentation team today. So I'm going to talk about workload protection, as I mentioned, and I lead the regional sales here for, as Anand mentioned, for secure workload, or used to be called tetration, and that's what we're going to focus on today. But I sit within the secure workload and analytics team for Cisco. So many of you've probably seen a variant of this slide, but just wanted to really nail home as to what we're seeing at the moment. Applications, these are obviously the critical to our organizations working, and our users are accessing them. They're no longer accessing them from on-prem, in the office. Those users are remote. Those applications are running everywhere. They're on-prem, they're in the cloud, and they're moving. Those applications are moving. They're dynamic as well. So, you can't set a policy, to protect that workload based on the behavior of an application from last week or a month ago or 3 months ago. It has to be live. It has to move. It has to breathe with that application as it moves. So wherever that workload moves, you need to be consistent. Okay, so it's constantly changing, and we've got to really be prepared here to have systems in place that can allow us to do that, because it's a whole lot of data, it's a whole lot of work to do manually. So it needs to be automatic. And you got to remember as well, every organization's environment is unique, whether they be 100% on-prem, whether they be 100% in the cloud, somewhere in between. You know, what percentage right now with COVID of their workers are working remotely, and how many are on-prem? Everything is different for every organization. So you need a solution that's not only going to protect these workloads, run everywhere from an infrastructure perspective, but also update, you know, with those with the behavior changes that are unique to your environment. So that's the big threat here. And I've put a quote up at the top. This came from the IT Ops Times at the end of last year. It was quite interesting, but 500 million new apps to be written by 2023, almost exclusively on the cloud. And the attack surface there is huge, and we need to make sure that we're prepared for this. So I'm going to touch on that today. So some of the challenges that we're needing to face. There's all this data that we have here. This virtualization of it. We've got this expanded attack surface, which I just mentioned. And really, what are those threats? What are those attackers looking to get? They're really looking at those workloads. Okay, that's where the crown jewels are. And what we see is a lot of those threats that come into an organization really want to get, it's not really the north and south, it's that east to west traffic. It's where those workloads are. That's where we're seeing the interest from those threats and attackers. So you've got this expanded attack surface. You've got a pinpoint east-west traffic, that lateral movement inside, and then you've got the hybrid cloud environment here as well. As Raj mentioned there, how secure are you? It's a shared responsibility. You need to make sure you're on top of this. You can't just take it for granted that you're secure because you're with one of the big service providers there. And then you've got the workload moving around as well. That workload portability, and it's often when we run our application dependency mapping, it's quite interesting to see what that application, who's depending on, who it's communicating with. Often customers think it's just 5, 10 communications or however many communications, but when you actually see it graphically, it's thousands of communications going on. So we need to make sure that we have a zero trust model, and I'll touch on that today, because workload protection really falls into the zero trust framework. And we need to make sure that whoever's getting access is trusted, okay, and constantly trusted. And then we've got this application architecture, which is in continuous development. Okay, so bringing all this together, there's a lot of challenges there for customers to address. So when we look at Cisco Secure Workload, what is it? Basically, it is an application workload platform. It's there to secure your compute instances right across any infrastructure, from your on-prem, bare metal, your virtual environments, through to your containers and obviously cloud infrastructure there. So you need the protection in any infrastructure with any workload type as well. So what effectively we're doing is delivering a security policy, a dynamic security policy that's applied across all your workloads. Okay, this is end to end, and I'm going to go through how we do this shortly, but means that wherever that workload is, whatever cloud and whatever infrastructure it is, you have the protection, the policy, the security policy around your workload.
So Ross, if I ask, where do we essentially start from the workload protection out of these?
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got to remember every setup is different. And we're talking large data here. There's a huge amount of data that we're looking at protecting. So you need to be able to scale with it, but you also need security around these workloads, and you also need autonomy. It has to be autonomous. You can't do this manually, as I said earlier on. So these workloads are dynamic. They're potentially moving. They're scaling up and down. The behaviors are changing. You've then got the infrastructure, which I just mentioned as well, this hybrid, whether it be on-prem or multi-cloud. So you need to segment these workloads from these lateral threats spreading. And that's why I said those crown jewels, those workloads are the crown jewels. So if you're not protecting your workloads today, then you have an area of attack which could be really a critical area of attack that you need to plug that gap. And this is where CISCO Secure Workload comes in. Often customers, and I'll talk about it later on, often customers do get a little bit worried that we hear about micro-segmentation. I think it's a huge project and very complicated. Hopefully today I'm going to show you how we can make that much easier for you. So I'm going to start with zero trust for workload. So essentially what we're looking to do is restricting access to those workloads. We do that basing it on risk. We add policy to it, and we add context, to it, and we create a policy around your workload that moves with your workload. Now, to do this, we need application visibility. So we do application dependency mapping. We need to create a policy, test a policy, and enforce a policy that allows us to contain those breaches and prevent any lateral movement, so we can protect the workload if we see lateral movement happening. So that's the primary use for zero trust. And you may have heard zero trust over the last few years. I know it's been particularly prominent over the last couple of years, whether it be Forrester or Gartner. But for Cisco Zero Trust, this is where, our workload pillar. So Zero Trust forms three pillars. There's workforce, workplace, and workload. Workload is what we're talking about today, wherever that workload is moving. So how do we verify trust? So we need to know what's running, what's critical, and get visibility on that so we can identify those workloads and enforce policies around those workloads. That enables us to contain the breaches and minimize that lateral movement I mentioned. And we're going to double down on this shortly, because this is micro segmentation, but not network segmentation. This is application micro segmentation. And then obviously we want to block that communication as well, but we need to do that continuously. So something coming back to what Raj said before is, that kind of CSPM, the cloud posture. You need to be able to monitor continuously if you're compliant. And that's the same in this scenario here. We need to be able to continuously monitor those workloads. And if they're out of compliance, let's reassess and let's start again. And I'll show you that kind of circular flow model shortly. So this is the zero trust framework I mentioned. This is where we sit here in the central column, the workloads. So looking at securing the connections within your apps across the multi-cloud. And so that's kind of a vertical. From a horizontal here, this is where we sit, right in this workload layer here. This is secure workload. There are application layers, there's infrastructure layers, but we're looking at this very important workload layer here. So we're able to see what applications are being used, who they're dependent on, who they're connected with, who's communicating with them, what data is coming in and out, etc. Okay, it's vitally important. We need to know that before we can enforce any policy. So just some high-level outcomes of secure workload for everyone. I'm going to talk about this a lot more in a moment, but microsegmentation, this is essentially stopping that east to west lateral movement. We're looking at creating a policy that's consistent right across your network, but it's individual for each application. Okay, we're using workload, context, and application behavior to consistently enforce that policy that we're creating. To do this, we need to do application dependency mapping, and I'll show that in a moment. But equally, we need to know about software vulnerabilities. Now, this is a huge attack surface for those attackers. So what we do is we bring this context into the policy that we're creating around that workload, and based on obviously NIST and OS vendors, those vulnerabilities. Okay, so it allows us to be able to show you straight away to a customer, hey, you've got a lot of vulnerabilities going on in your software. You need to reduce those down. Here's some actions to take. Let's reduce that attack surface down immediately. We do behavior-based anomaly detection. So I mentioned before, application behavior changes. And it constantly changes. You can't use last week's behavior for today's application. So you need to be able to look at the behavior of that application, and we do that via process-based anomaly detection. We identify those adversaries very proactively. We use, we're based on the MITRE process, the MITRE attack framework there, so we can identify those malicious processes that are happening in those application workloads. And then finally, as I mentioned about the zero trust. So this helps a customer achieve that zero trust for their workloads and applications, building that security policy, those allow list policies, so we're letting the right people in. So again, reducing the attack surface, and also very critical, simplifying compliance. And I will touch on that a little bit later.
So Ross, we looked at the features of the zero trust and other solution that you mentioned for secure workload. How do you say secure workload from Cisco is unique when it comes to the competition, maybe?
Great question. Great question. Yeah, I mean, it's the deep visibility that we're able to give and the analytics approach. You put those two together, and we're creating this whitelist policy per application, right down to that application. Then we're adding, and I'll show you shortly, we're going to add additional context in from different sources. And we're able to create this full life cycle policy of microsegmentation. And that's the critical thing. It's the full policy of policy lifecycle for microsegmentation. So I'm going to walk through that in just a moment, but absolutely great question. So I think that's what really sets us apart, our ability to do that above all others. I've highlighted just a few kind of business value use cases here for everyone, whether it be SecOps and, it could be operations or threat detection. It could be NetOps or even into your developers, also compliance there. I'm not going to run through each one of those because, in a moment, I'm going to talk about microsegmentation, and that's going to cover a lot of these use cases here. But I'll leave it there. If the slides are going to be shared in the future, this is a fantastic starting point for you if you're looking at securing your workloads. So let's talk about microsegmentation. I was having a laugh with Anand the other day, and we were talking about how this naming of microsegmentation, this word, is used a lot. And if any of you have ever seen the Marvel movies, like Ant-Man, etc., they talk about quantum, the quantum realm, quantum this, quantum that. What does that mean? It's getting thrown around an awful lot. So let's talk about microsegmentation. Now, there's different forms of segmentation. You've obviously got zone-based, you're perimeter-based there. You've got network-based. We're going to talk today about microsegmentation at application level, okay? But what is microsegmentation? It's really to create a secure zone in your data center or cloud. And in our case, we're looking to isolate those workloads and protect them individually and automatically as well. Okay, that allows you to scale, it allows you to comply, and it's not heavy lifting for the team. Okay, so really looking at security at a granular level, at the workload level. Okay, so let's quickly talk about what microsegmentation is. I'll probably jump through these quite quickly. Everyone thinks that enforcing the policy is the hardest thing. It's not. It's actually, how do we generate the policy and maintain the policy? That is the critical piece of microsegmentation here. I mentioned all of those challenges that you've got in your networks and with your applications and workloads, but how do we generate a policy around each application and maintain that policy consistently? And that's the scary thing, or it has been previously. And this is where a lot of customers, I think, fall down, is they try to do this in one go. They try to do it in one shot. And I have seen some really scary things happen with customers when they've tried to do this in one go. It just doesn't happen. Microsegmentation is an absolute journey. You need to do it step by step. And obviously, the quicker you can implement it all, the better. But if you don't go step by step, then it can lead to catastrophic failure, like we've seen in the past. I've showed here, very unhappy life for many customers trying to do it just like that. So everyone knows about zone-based segmentation. Looking here, looking at the firewall, we're protecting everything that's inside that zone. Absolutely fine, no problems. Everyone knows that. Still should be part of your network setup as it is. Then we move on to more your network-based microsegmentation. Okay, so within a Cisco context, you could be looking at an SDA environment or even an ACI environment, but really you're looking at more of that network-based microsegmentation. And then finally, now we're looking at workload. So around each and every workload, having a policy which protects that workload no matter the infrastructure it's sitting on or where it moves to. And this is the granular level. Okay, so what you're actually getting, and I liked one of the terms that Raj used earlier, is that defense in depth. Okay, you've got step 1 and step 2. You actually need to move into step 3 now. Okay. So I mentioned about the full lifecycle policy for a secure workload, and this is it. This is really what we're doing. So we're looking at these heterogeneous workloads, and what we're doing is we're mapping the application and dependencies. Okay, so we're doing that application dependency mapping. We need that to be able to create our policy. We're also looking at the software vulnerabilities as well, those CVEs. We need those in that context to be able to give us a really robust policy. So once we've got these, we're actually able to generate this unique policy per workload. Wherever that workload would go, this would follow, okay? But we don't just stop there. We actually test that. We verify that that policy does what it says it should do, okay? This is before it goes live on your system. We use your historical data there to test that policy, validate that policy, verify. Once it is verified and validated, we dynamically enforce that policy on the workload. Okay. And then from there, it's that continuing compliance, that monitoring and alerting. And if something should be out of compliance or maybe a behavior changes on the workload, going back to step 1 again and doing it all again. But you need to do that automatically. So what this allows us to do is reduce that attack surface down. I've just mentioned about obviously the CVEs, letting you know where those vulnerabilities are, but also making sure that those workloads are protected wherever they go. You're reducing your rule management, which from an operator will make a very valuable contribution to their day. It improves the time to segmentation though. So I've talked about a lot of customers falling foul of trying to do everything in one go. Very, very difficult. Here, we can increase that time to segment that network and those workloads by this process. Okay, so we're not taking years to actually deliver this. So just briefly about application dependency mapping. Why do we need it? Well, it is a key priority within secure workload the life cycle here. It can't be done manually. It's too huge, as I mentioned earlier on. But it provides us the blueprint. It provides that blueprint of communication, which we use for the policy. Okay, so how are those different tiers communicating? Is there any direct connections to the database servers? How are users actually connecting to the application? It's absolutely fundamental to what we do here at Secure Workload. So once we've done this application dependency mapping, we've looked at obviously the software vulnerabilities as well. We auto-generate this segmentation policy based on that behavior. And remember, this is consistent, okay? So we use that dependency map as a blueprint. We generate this microsegmentation policy. Remember, we haven't deployed it yet. We're not enforcing it yet, just creating it at the moment, okay? We're looking at the traffic between application components. That gives us now the foundation to move on to adding additional context because we want to create a policy which has as much context in as possible. So additional context can be added from various points. It could be container-related tags from Kubernetes, OpenShift, security tags from the cloud providers, could be IP and subnet attributes, could be domain names from your DNS servers. All of this context is collected periodically and used to update these policies consistently. Okay, so very, very important piece there. We can also get workforce and endpoint information. So in this example here, I'm using a couple of Cisco solutions. I do apologize, but we've got our Cisco AnyConnect, which is one of our VPN solution there. We collect telemetry from this product, as well as ICE, Identity Services Engine. So we have two connectors here. We can get this additional telemetry, which we feed into our policy as well. So again, very, very important information in order to be able to create this policy robustly. So this is bringing all of that together. Everything I've just talked about is, creating and generating that unified policy, which is the hardest thing to do. That consistent behavioral change of the application, knowing who they're talking to, plus all of the additional context and knowing where those vulnerabilities are, pulling that all into one policy. And then we simulate it. So we're testing it, we're validating it here. We're seeing, using that historical data, what impact that would have in real time without actually impacting your operational network. So we can simulate policy changes on that historical traffic. Okay, so then audit, I love this saying, audit becomes a function of continuous machine learning. Okay, that auditing and that compliance there is continuous. So it takes it away, all that pressure from the operators. And then we enforce. So there's a few ways that we can enforce this policy, but obviously what we're talking about here is to be as close to the application as possible. We want granular policies, dynamic policies around those workloads. We need it to be infrastructure agnostic as well. I've mentioned about on-prem, I've mentioned in the cloud, I've not mentioned any vendor there, okay, where we need to be agnostic. So we actually have in Secure Workload, we have an agent that we use. So when we can use our agent, as you can see here, that's getting a lot. That's the enforcement point. That agent is the enforcement point on the workload. Okay, but if we can't get an agent in, we can still work in that environment. So maybe we work through our firewalls, and using our firewall management center here, we can enforce the policy that we create in Secure Workload, push that granular policy out to Cisco firewalls through the FMC. But okay, you say not everyone's got a Cisco firewall or an FMC. Totally appreciate that. We can also work with third parties like AlgoSec here, Tuffin. We can use that same policy through AlgoSec and push that out to non-Cisco infrastructure as well. So now you're enforcing on both Cisco and non-Cisco infrastructure at the same time. We work with ACI, F5, a number of different solutions in order to be able to take that policy from your workload and get it right out across your wider network.
Ross, if I may ask, why should we look at policy lifecycle approach to microsegmentation rather than going for a policy point enforcement approach?
Yeah, great question. Great question. I think the overall thing is it's more robust, Anand. I think you said the point enforcement, it's not a complete approach. As I've kind of just shown you there, if you do just a point enforcement, there's a lot of failure that can happen there. Because you need to be consistently, looking at those policies. You need to apply change. They're very dynamic. So it's not just about enforcing the policy. It's about creating, designing, testing, validating, enforcing, and then continuous compliance from there. So if you don't have that, then it's making your life a whole lot harder. So I think that's the major difference there. Hope that answered the question.
Sure, thanks.
So I'm coming up to the end of my presentation now, but just wanted to highlight a couple of additional things here. So we've created this policy, we've tested it, we've enforced it, but then you've got that policy compliance. You need to be able to monitor that application behavior continuously, automatically as well, which means that if there are any anomalies, in process level anomalies there or anomalies with that application, then that communication path is changing. You can see it very, very quickly, and you can lock down that workload if required. And that continuous adjustment, shall we say, allows us to update the policies continuously with those workloads. As those workloads migrate between environments and servers as well, wherever they're hosted, you need to ensure that policy compliance continuously. So that's kind of underlying everything that I've spoken about today. So identifying workloads here, the behaviors. So this again is, what I've just mentioned, is critical to kind of foundation of this whole process. Is you need to understand what processes are active, who's communicating, that behavior. You need to identify those anomalies as quick as possible, and you need to address that against predefined techniques and tactics as well. So this is where I was mentioning about the MITRE framework, etc. Earlier on. So now you've got this policy. You need to be continuously looking at the behavior of the application, the processes, as well as making sure compliance is continuous. And then I think finally, we're looking at that attack surface. These are the vulnerabilities we're looked at. You need to know the software packages. You need to know those high-risk vulnerabilities so you can address them very, very quickly. And that enables us to help define those security policies around your workload, especially around vulnerable workloads as well. This is what it looks like. So this is Secure Workload Dashboard. As you can see here, you've got your overall posture score, your security posture score. You can see your hash scores here, your attack surface score, your data leak score. You can actually visualize what's happening in your environment for your workloads, and obviously use this to not only protect those workloads, but identify areas that you need to improve. The solution you can have as a SaaS or an on-prem. I think I've kind of mentioned that as we've gone through here as well. So we can work in any environment for any customer. But as Raj said earlier on, majority of customers are both on-prem and in the cloud. So you need a solution that's going to be able to work across both. And then that's it from myself.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ross. This was very, very helpful. I think we all got a very, very good view of what Cisco Secure Workload does for us, right? And we heard Raj talk about the whole requirement of workload protection. We heard Ross talk about how Cisco does it best. And now let's complete the story with our last panelist, our industry leader, Mr. Rajesh Chandiramani. Rajesh, welcome again. Rajesh, as a global business leader for cybersecurity and digital solutions, and obviously a trusted advisor for customers, what do you think would be the challenges which the customers share during their journey to cloud security and workload protection, and how Tech Mahindra plays a big part in that journey?
So I think, first of all, thanks Raj and Ross for so insightful presentation. It helps many of my customers when they take a decision to move the workloads to cloud. The thinking behind what Raj mentioned, the paradox, is always the concern for most of the customers, because they want to be secured. I mean, you imagine a CIO taking or a CDO taking a decision to move the workloads on a cloud, and there is the first day you do it and it hits, and there is a surface attack, and we would be looking here and there and seek for help, right? It could be career limiting. So a lot of people are cautious, but people who have experienced it are putting a lot of workloads behind in cloud, and they know there's technology available. And Ross really demonstrated how the technology can be leveraged, even if it is a hybrid cloud, distributed systems, complex applications, critical ones, you can always micro-segment it. Now, the challenge you asked is, what does the customer see on a system integrator is, yes, the role of the system integrator comes in when there is confusion on what technology to choose, what workloads to move, and they need advisory. So a lot of my team is focused on advising my 1100 customers on building comfort, on making technology choices, and when it comes to whether it's a firewall or zero trust network, or where how to micro segment and prioritize. That's where they need guidance and advice. So my team does a lot of that in the initial stages. And once the decision is taken, And I just talked about a very large bank this morning, and they are spread across 16 countries, and they are prioritizing the workload moments by country, by application criticality. But the foremost and the most important thing in consideration is security. I mean, you don't want to be against a regulator. You don't want to be against, your board if something goes wrong. So system integrators do play a very large role in terms of making those choices, building the comfort, taking the risk along with the service providers, and delivering the future proof combination of hybrid cloud.
Absolutely. So Rajesh, I think what people say, right, the cloud security or workload protection, it's not a destination, it's a journey. We have also heard Ross and Raj talk about that. So what would be your recommendation? I mean, people should start early in this adoption journey, or they should just do it across while they're growing? How do you say, what would be the recommendation from your side?
So from my perspective, a cloud transformation is a journey which is typical to a backpacking, which most of us do once we finish, right? We choose options basis what people have experienced through, because you have not experienced. So someone will say, oh, Rishikesh is a better place, especially for the Israelis, right? They plan it in Rishikesh, but one or two may have a bad experience because you might choose a wrong timing or wrong weather or whatever. So it is very, very important that when anyone chooses a journey like this, it's almost like planning a long-term holiday. You need to choose the first things right, okay? And it is a journey, because you can have a very bad experience by choosing a wrong technology or a wrong, workload, and then you will be scared. And then till that time, someone else comes and tells you what is how the scare goes away. So it is very, very important. The journey started with the right kind of thinking, planning, okay? And there are no big mistakes which happens in the initial planning. There are smaller ones which we can live with, and there's technology available. I mean, Ross really demonstrated how technology can help you really protect. I mean, you can start with some customers start with low hanging, okay? Some customers start with critical ones, because the surface attackers wants to get into your critical. They are not interested in something which is not critical, where there is no data. They are interested. So it is all down to how do you protect your workloads against those attacks, surface attackers, because they are constantly looking at data. They are constantly looking at. So you got to really plan, and again, it varies from an organization and even a vertical to a vertical, because sometimes the regulators actually, and restrict you to do what you want to do. But many industries, there is no restriction, so you can be free flowing and really get it done.
Absolutely, Rajesh. Love the example that you use, the analogy that you used of using a backpack, right? How you start your journey, right? That's was very, very interesting to look at, because yes, you start small, maybe with some essential things, but over the journey, you kind of change your stance, right? There would be bigger hacks like solar winds, which will happen, colonial pipeline, which will happen, and then you change your stance, and then new technologies like SASE would come in, or zero trust Ross talked about, it will come in, and you change your stance and you adopt to it. So very, very rightfully placed. Thanks for that, Rajesh. So I think what we heard today is workload protection is very important for us. It is an essential building block which kind of allows your applications to work together and your business process to run. So Raj stressed on that, how it is kind of helping in the posture management. Then we heard Ross talk about how CISCO is kind of looking at it. And then we completed the story with Tech Mahindra's trusted advisor coming and suggesting how we are helping our customers in this journey, right? So the whole story is now complete in front of us. So I'm sure the audience would have loved it. And I think it's the right time for us to start the Q&A session. I'm sure the audience would be looking to ask some interesting questions to our panelists here. So please put in your questions in the Q&A window. There's already some very, very good questions coming your way, Ross. I think people loved the paradox example given by Raj. People loved the examples that you shared during your presentation, Ross. So I think the first question is to Raj. Raj, I think Aditya Birla is such a big conglomerate, right? You would be looking at different solutions, different vendors. How do you kind of look at as a strategy whether you want to go multi-partner or you want to consolidate into a single partner? Because I think one important point you touched on was unifying the view, one pane of glass to look at the whole posture of the organization. So what is your view on that, Raj? You're on mute, Raj.
Yeah. Sorry, Anand. Yeah. So, well, we look at it, as they say, to be having a wider view and a narrow view, and you have to, just zoom in and zoom out at different times when I look at the larger level. And as I said, that we have, I think there was never a good time for security professionals in many ways. There's a lot of support. And I think I read a question that how do we create this in the mind of the CISO? Somebody was writing it. I think the board is very supportive. The leaders of the companies are always very supportive. And when you have a large canvas to play on, you create a picture of what you want to do. As I said, in the defense and death architecture, in the control level, respond level, recover. We are looking at cyber insurance in a big way. We are looking at CERT, strengthening our CERT mechanism. We are strengthening on the endpoint side. We are strengthening on the cloud side, and so on and so forth. And there the roadmap becomes extremely important. So what is the roadmap you want to create? Actually, we took an outside view even to create the roadmap, because we knew in many ways by experience and guts and strategy and learning and so on, but you still need a second pair of eyes. Look at the roadmap, because you don't want to do something and tomorrow find. Plus, you need to have compensatory controls in place, that if you're not doing it today, what compensatory control you have in place, which is there. So I think a lot of these considerations do go. For example, Ross touched on network on micro segmentation. We have, like we are looking at something today. We know micro segmentation is such a big journey, and you need to start it when you're prepared for it, and you need to really well do that. That's extremely important, and it's a large undertaking which is there. So when do we start? It's in our roadmap at some point, which is there. So I think multiple service provider is another matter, because once you have decided that these are the primary steps you need to do at different points in the defense and death architecture, then you need to look at that. Do you want to have, how many partners in place, and a choice between it's really an art. You need to have really, you can't have too many partners. It doesn't make sense. We have to deal with so many people. One important thing is the management bandwidth. We can only do this much, and we have to define what's critical in that. Our bandwidth, our own team. So many considerations do come, in doing these things. So you need to look at partners who are definitely, the best in breed, with advisors who can implement it. At the same time, you want to widen the footprint, so that you have lesser partner, optimum number of partners. I think that's the right word to put at, which is there. At the same time, not losing on the capabilities which are there. So I think, it's an art and science combined. I really, and then you look at, of course, the partners have to be leaders. For example, we were talking of network segmentation. So it comes to virtual firewalls. So we know who are the leaders. We have 3-4 players who know. Now, but then who is already in the system with us? And but at the same time, do I need to look at endpoint? Do I need to look at the perimeter differently? And do I need to look at the at the application level differently? So you need to have these considerations, those checks and balances. You can't have one player. And so all of these things do go into the decision making metrics, if I have to tell it.
Absolutely, Raj. I think your point of view definitely helped me today. I have understood a different point of view of looking at holistically the whole situation of cloud security and overall workload protection. Thanks for your point of view. I'm sure the audience would have loved that also, your point of views. The next question is to you, Ross. So how do we educate or create a need for the solutions around workload protection in a CISO's mind, right? Is there a dashboard? Is there a visualization tool that we can show them and explain them that this is how you are vulnerable, and then kind of create a pitch for CISCO?
Yeah, I think it might have been Raj, you mentioned this earlier on, but a CISO's life is never easy. It really isn't, and you live and die by the sword here. It's your role is to make sure that your infrastructure is secure there, and where are your crown jewels, and it's a very tough position to be in. So the easier we can make it, the better. Absolutely agree with that. So yeah, I mean, there's a number of different ways to do this. I showed you just for this solutions to secure workload, the kind of easy visualization that you could get just off our dashboard. You could see where the CVEs are, you could see the data loss, you could get a overall round score, which I think is perfect for a CISO. They can go straight to it and say, okay, we got some problems here, team, let's go and investigate, go and work on that. Much easier, and gives them a little bit more confidence that they don't have to go down into the deep to get that information. They can see it straight away. But we also have other integrations as well. So like secure workload fits into and works with a number of different solutions. And we have one called Secure X, Cisco Secure X. Now that is our kind of security dashboard, and think of it as an API gateway. All right, it not only has Cisco solutions feeding into it, but it also can take third-party solutions as well. So what you're actually getting is an overall dashboard now and a whole holistic view of your network, whether it be endpoints, whether it be workloads, whether it be DNS, whatever you want, you can see on that dashboard. So we're trying on this journey to move down to make it a lot easier for a CISO to know exactly what their problems in their environment are, so they can address that quickly, because they're in a very precarious position if there is a breach. So they need to be able to act proactively and then very quickly if anything does happen.
We'll take one more last question. We're at the top of the hour. This is an interesting discussion. I would have loved to carry on, but let's go to the last question. So we were not hearing much about workload protection in the past, but recently all the analysts and different magazines, different advisors, different practitioners are suddenly talking about workload protection more and more. What has changed suddenly? Why is such a focus?
Yeah, I think it was kind of put in everyone kind of knew about it. They knew they had to do this at some point. And, as Raj said, you've got to go, and Rajesh said, in your backpack, you've just kind of got to start that process. But it was always put into the too hard basket. It was very difficult. Everyone was trying to do it in one go, which is, it leads to failure. So, I think what we've seen now is more solutions like secure workload coming out, which can help with that process, help ease and speed up that process. And equally, you've got, at the same time, a lot more transition from your on-prem to your cloud infrastructure as well. So those workloads are moving. So there's a lot more going on now than maybe 3, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. But I think the sophistication of attacks is increasing as well. We need to try and find where those vulnerabilities are and reduce that attack surface. So securing that lateral movement internally, I think, has become much more prime importance than it was a few years ago. It was always important, but it's now really at the forefront, and that's where the likes of microsegmentation comes in. Really helps to help with that lateral movement.
So Anand, I'd like to just spend a minute on this. I think
sure, absolutely.
From a practitioner's point of view, see, we did, a couple of years back, we put up something on the configurations of the cloud, to look at a tool which could tell us, and it's pretty useful actually. And when we made it on, it just lit us, it just lit up the dashboard, and we had, X many configurations which are insecure, so many ports are open. And so it gives you a very visual, very nice view of, very easily understandable view of your attack surface. We didn't do it last year. We felt it was okay, but what has happened is that, the overall threat scenario has increased. In a matter of 1 week, I had guests from Nigeria trying to enter my network. I had people from Russia trying to enter my network and creating a significant vulnerability. I had a phishing attack in Philippines, which is there. So when you know that this is going on, you need to look at, it's an overall elevation of the cybersecurity criticality, which is, as they say, that a tide lifts all the boats. So cloud is so important. We have so much business in cloud. So you need to make it secure, and you need to look at all the best tools and have a clear visibility, and they are available in the market.
That's a very important real-world example you have just given us, Raj. Thank you for that. I mean, real-time threats where people are trying to infiltrate your network. I think the audience would have definitely noted that point down and kind of made an attempt that now they should be looking at workload protection much more seriously. Thanks for that example again. So that brings us to the end of the session. I would love to welcome you again, all of you, for this interesting discussion. Again, based on the interest that you would show us to the Tech Mahindra team, I would love to again welcome these panelists here. Raj, thanks for your point of views. Thanks, Rajesh. Thanks, Ross. I think the discussion was very, very insightful, and we would have loved to continue, but then we are at the top of the hour. Some very interesting points which were shared today, and I think the audience would go back with some good learnings, good takeaways, and something which would kind of make them think and come back to us to ask more queries, right? So for any more questions, please reach out to esrm.communications@techmahindra.com. We would be waiting for your questions, and we would be very, very eager to kind of answer that. Thanks again for being part of this, to the audience, to the panelists today. Stay safe, take care, and secure yourself and secure your customers. Thank you.
Thank you, Anand.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anand. Thanks, bye. Thanks.
Okay,
Bye, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. Yeah, pleasure.
Thanks.